necessary to counter CCP aggression and rebuild America's and the free world's competitive advantages.
Joe McMaster, why don't you pause for a second? You'll be given additional time and we'll take care of this.
Should the United States impose economic sanctions on China, or is this move risky and counterproductive? As tensions between the two countries escalate over issues such as Taiwan and trade, some people believe that the US is deliberately provoking China. However, there are concerns that these actions may cause more harm than good in the long run. In the past, the US has used economic sanctions as a political tool, but recent events with Russia have shown that this strategy can have negative consequences. Now the US is considering imposing sanctions on China, but is this a wise decision, or could it lead to disastrous outcomes? Watch this thought-provoking video and share your thoughts on this important issue. Hi there, my name is Anastasia and welcome to Market Economy. Today's video is all about discussing American sanctions on China. Are they a necessary step or just another example of economic self-destruction? Let's dive in and find out together. Economic sanctions have become a common tool for US foreign policy objectives. However, they often don't achieve their intended goals and can harm US economic interests. Some US advisors called out this ineffective approach in the late 1990s, but no action was taken to improve its effectiveness. As a result, economic sanctions have repeatedly failed to change the target's behavior, and in recent years they have even backfired, causing damage to the US economy and NATO allies. Despite this, the current administration led by Joe Biden appears to be continuing this approach with plans to supply arms to Russia and set its sights on China. Recently, there has been a move to ban the social media app TikTok, which is owned by a Chinese company called ByteDance. This follows bans on other Chinese companies like Huawei and restrictions on semiconductors. The US House Foreign Affairs Committee voted to give President Biden the power to ban TikTok and other Chinese-owned apps under a law called the International Emergency Economic Powers Act.
We've been very clear that TikTok, poses a problem and an issue. And so we have concerns about that as it relates to Americans' data, collecting Americans' data, and the potential national security risk. And we've been very, very clear on that.
Well, some people are concerned that banning TikTok violates free speech rights. A spokesperson for TikTok also warned that it could hurt the export of American culture and values. China has condemned this move as an abuse of state power. Canada and the European Union have also imposed bans on TikTok, citing concerns over national security and spying by the Chinese Communist Party. This is part of a long history of sanctions between the US and China that goes back to 1949. Some people wonder if the Biden administration will learn from the past or continue with ineffective policies. In the 1970s, the US eased up on sanctions against China. But recent actions by both Trump and Biden have caused controversy. The sanctions target Chinese corporations, enterprises, and research institutions. In 1989, after the events at Tiananmen Square, the US stopped providing development aid and restricted exports to China, including weapons and military equipment. Fast forward to 2017, and China is now considered a threat to the US national security. This has led to trade restrictions and measures against Chinese tech companies such as Huawei, which was put on a list that limits its business with the USA. Although both countries play important roles in the global economy, the US is still working to contain China. The Office of Foreign Assets Control imposes financial sanctions on Chinese individuals and companies that break US sanctions against countries like Iran and North Korea, or engage in human rights abuses or weapons of mass destruction proliferation. Those on the SDN list face consequences such as blocked assets, visa restrictions, and denial of access to the US financial system. In addition to secondary sanctions, companies that break current sanctions may face enforcement measures or fines from the US government. Some Chinese organizations linked to the PRC's armed forces have been identified, and US citizens, residents, and legal entities are prohibited from investing in securities of companies defined as communist Chinese military companies. Recently, the US government has taken action against China by expanding the scope of national emergency declared during the previous administration. President Biden has added 8 more organizations to the list connected with Chinese military industrial complex, which includes big names such as China Mobile Limited, China National Nuclear Corporation, and CNOOC Limited. In addition, the US is also using export controls in its policy towards China. The Bureau of Industry and Security at the US Department of Commerce maintains a set of sanctions lists to restrict the export of certain products to listed companies. The entity list and military end users list contain about 80 companies with Beijing Skyrizon Aviation Industry Investment and Chongqing Optal Telecom Technology. Being on the entity list means companies need a license to export products from the US, which is often difficult for Chinese companies to obtain. The US Congress is pushing for various sanction bills targeting China, as competition in the high-tech sector has become a big factor in the economic and trade confrontation between the two countries. They want to limit Chinese companies' access to technologies and components through sanctions and trade barriers and ruin the reputation of their businesses, leading to a trend towards technological decoupling between the two countries. However, China's growing capability in advanced technology sectors does little to alleviate Americans' concerns, as the US is dependent on foreign suppliers of R&D intensive products, including components and technology used in the defense industry. The semiconductor industry is a crucial area of competition between the US and China, particularly for the development of artificial intelligence. China currently leads in chip production quantity with support from its government, while the US still maintains top-quality chip production. To support the US semiconductor industry, the Chips and Science Act was enacted in August 2022. This act aims to provide funding and prohibit expansion into countries deemed a threat. However, China's advantage in artificial intelligence lies in its ability to accumulate big data, while the US has a mature business ecosystem and the soft power to attract talents. Some US companies are relocating high-tech production to India due to tensions with China, but it's uncertain how this will play out in the long run, especially given the current geopolitical climate that sees that the US and its allies engaging in economic pressure against Russia's partners. Let's see what has been achieved so far. A recent report by the Australian Strategic Policy Institute, supported by the US State Department, suggests that China is advancing faster than expected in the global technology race. The study shows that China has surpassed the US in critical and emerging fields such as defense, space, robotics, energy, biotechnology, and artificial intelligence. China has taken the lead in 37 out of 44 technologies that were examined, with all of the world's top 10 leading research institutions in some areas being located in China. The report calls on Western countries to increase their investments in research and development to keep up with China's advantage. The latest news reveals that China's chip industry is growing faster than its foreign competitors. In the past 4 quarters, 19 out of 20 Chinese companies saw an increase in revenue, a significant jump from just 8 companies in the same period last year. Companies like Capricorn and the Chinese artificial intelligence chip are surpassing global leaders such as TSMC. This growth is also boosting chip suppliers and designers based in China, with total revenue increasing by 18% last year, reaching over 1 trillion yuan. Keep an eye on Capricorn, whose revenues has more than doubled in the past 4 quarters. Huawei is a Chinese telecom company that has been accused of having close ties with Chinese government security and intelligence services. This has raised concerns about cybersecurity risks in the countries where it operates. Despite these concerns, Huawei is ahead of the United States in 5G deployment with over 1 million base stations compared to just 100,000 in the US. Thus, the United States and its allies have taken measures to restrict Chinese companies, including Huawei, from accessing their telecom networks. However, Huawei's reputation in emerging economies remains strong, where it has been successful in providing next-generation networking capabilities at a lower cost, thanks to subsidies from Chinese state banks. Recently, the Chinese government fought back against the US by organizing meetings and releasing public documents. One of the most interesting is US hegemony and its perils, which calls out America for meddling in the other countries' affairs, starting wars and causing trouble for the world. The document accuses the US of promoting conflict and making political alliances, using national security measures, sanctions, and international laws for their benefit, and all while claiming to follow the rules-based international order. The US is also accused of bullying other countries in the economy, politics, military, technology, and culture. The question remains, are sanctions on China a smart move or economic suicide? Leave your comments on this matter. Share your point of view, and if you enjoy this video, please subscribe to our channel, give the video a like and share it with your friends. Also, you can find the link to the mentioned document in description below.